In this chapter, I want to show you how to create the ceilings in the model. Now, we have a couple different ceiling heights, and there are some techniques that we want to use in creating several of them. Also, I want to show you how to create crown molding using the Follow Me tool, as well as use Move Copy to create the roof beams that you'll see in the living room. To get started, we first need to create the geometry for the ceiling, and let's get started in the first floor. So we'll just click on the first floor layer that we set up. And remember, in the living room here, we have the tallest point of the house. Then there's this soffit here, or bulkhead. Then the dining room has drop ceiling, and then the kitchen is just a little bit lower. Since this is grouped, we can simply just take the rectangle tool and draw from the inside edge around the living room. Then draw this little bulkhead. Use the rectangle tool to draw the dining room and the kitchen. Now notice it flips some of the faces on some of our surfaces here. Remember, we want the blue faces to face inward and the white to face outward. If we were to orbit and look in our model, we want those white faces to be on this side. So let's go ahead and just right-click on the dining room one and reverse it, as well as on this bulkhead here. Now, a key to staying organized is to group this and assign it to a layer. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's take the Select tool and double-click, hold down Shift, double-click, and double-click. So that's going to select all of our elements. Then remember, we set up G as our keyboard shortcut, so I can press G to make this a group. Go to our Layers palette and create a new layer called Ceiling. And in Entity Info, with the geometry selected, go ahead and just put that on the ceiling layer. Click on the second floor. Take the Rectangle tool. And in this case, we're only concerned about the hallway and the master bedroom. So let's draw the first rectangle here, second one here, and a third one here. Draw this one for the master bedroom. Take the eraser and erase the edges. And again, keep this organized. So let's right-click and reverse this top face here. And take the Select tool, double-click, hold down Shift, double-click, make this a group, G, and assign this to the ceiling layer. Now notice that the ceiling of the first floor is visible here. A way that we can adjust that is you can assign the individual geometry to be of one group and then the outer geometry to be of another group. In the next section, let's show you how you can assign the geometry of the first floor ceiling into the first floor layer. So here we notice an error or a challenge that we have from creating the ceiling as a layer and then having it as a layer state for the first and second floor. To fix this so that we don't have the first floor visible when we have the rest of the first floor hidden, we want to actually assign the geometry within the group to the first floor layer. So notice that the first floor is on the ceiling layer, and if we double click and select all, which is Control A or Command A on a Mac, notice that all geometry is always drawn on layer 0. And I mentioned that before and stressed that to always draw on layer 0. Now here, we're going to change that a little bit. Instead of all this geometry being on layer 0, we want to in fact put this on the first floor layer. Let's go ahead and turn on the first floor layer. That way we can see it. And let's click off of the geometry. Click back on the second floor scene, and notice now that the first floor geometry now hides. And that is because the group itself is on the ceiling layer and the geometry within it is on the first floor. Let's do the same thing for the second floor. This time let's select all and assign the geometry to the second floor so that now when we click on our first floor and our second floor, we can see into those settings. While we're here, let's add one more scene, and that scene is going to be to turn off the ceiling layer. And that's really beneficial sometimes when you want to work within your model and you don't want the ceiling to hide all the geometry that you're trying to create in there. So let's add this as a new scene. And let's just rename this No Ceiling. And let's move it down. So that way when we're working on the overall, we have our ceiling in there. But when we're looking at details specifically within the floor, we can hide those. Remember also, you can select your geometry, press H just to hide it. And that way you're not hiding the layer, you're just hiding the object. And remember, U will unhide. In the next section, let's add some detail to some of our ceilings. Let's go ahead and add some textures to the ceilings that we just created. Let's start in the first floor. And let's go ahead and double click on the ceiling area here. Now remember, we have the hide rest of model turned on, and you can turn that on or off with Control H. Since we have a couple different ceiling heights, and specifically in the dining room here, Control H to unhide, we have this bulkhead here. Let's just take push-pull and push-pull this up. We have our edge there. And in the dining room here, the reason why this is lower than the rest of the rooms is because the central AC and all the ductwork actually run all above here. So there's the unit that actually sits right here, and then all the ducts basically run throughout the house from here. So they run this way and then up. And then there's the unit outside that sits here that runs to the unit there. So unfortunately, we have some drop ceilings in the room here. And as a solution, we were looking to buy some tiles. A great little thing that I like to do in SketchUp is use the products that I'm actually purchasing. Here's a website where we found this tin that we wanted to place within our drop ceiling. What's great about this is it's a square texture that we can right click and just save as and bring into our model. I just saved it onto my hard drive. I'm going to actually orbit so that we're upside down, just to make it a little bit easier for us as we're working. And let's just add some detail to this. So let's just import under File, Import. See this tin tile texture that we have. We're going to import as texture. And it's a 2 foot by 2 foot grid. So we'll start in the corner, type in 2 feet, or we could type in 24 and press enter to get our grid size here. Now we lined it to the bottom corner, but in actuality, we centered the texture. Remember, you can right click, go to texture position, and you can position this now so that the tiling is centered here. From left to right, it's almost perfect. And top and bottom looks like there's one, maybe half of one tile that's cut off. That's just it. In order to create the crown molding in the master bedroom, we need to use the Follow Me tool. Like the roof pitch example that we used earlier, we need to begin by creating a profile. To create the profile, we first need to move inside the house and look at the corner of the wall and create the profile. Orbit through the window here. Just pan up a little bit. And double click to make sure that you're inside the group of the ceiling geometry. Remember, you can press Control H to turn the rest of the model on, which we want. And right here, inside this group, I want you to take the rectangle tool and just draw a rectangle that's 2 inches, 2 inches. That's going to be the start of our profile. We can Control H to hide the rest of the model and just zoom in a little bit closer. I like to start with the rectangle here, 2 inches by 2 inches, because that's going to help us define a face to draw on. It's more challenging if you don't have this face here. Sometimes SketchUp will draw on different faces, and we want this really just to align on this face. And of course, it helps to have the face there to draw from. Let's take the line tool, and starting in this bottom edge here, we're going to click once, and we're going to draw out 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch. And let's draw up 0.125. Let's do the same thing up here. 1/8 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch. Next, let's draw a line that's out 1/8 of an inch as well, and 1/8 of an inch from here as well, giving us a base to draw our arc from. Take the arc tool now and draw from this endpoint down to the bottom endpoint. So that's our second click. And then our third click is going to be right here. And again, I'm just sort of estimating this. This doesn't have to be perfect. So let's say that's our profile. You could add, of course, more detail if you want. Just going to keep this pretty simple. Let's take the eraser and just erase these two edges. And now we have our profile. So like we did previously, we can do this the easy way, which is by selecting the face and then clicking the follow me and clicking on the profile face, or we could follow it ourselves. I prefer the easy way. Remember, take the select tool. Let's actually orbit upside down a little bit. I'm going to zoom extents with Shift Z so that we can see this a little bit easier. And again, remember, we can select the face, click on follow me, and then click on the profile face. Going to create all that detail for us. A little edge, creates a nice little corner detail there. To create the opening in the ceiling of the first floor for our staircase, we need to use a function called copy paste in place. Now before we do that, I noticed a little mistake that we have in our layer structure. When I click on the first floor, the crown molding still shows up in our model. And that's because we drew it on layer 0 within the ceiling group, where the rest of the geometry is on the second floor group. So let's just turn on the second floor group, select all, and just make sure that all this geometry now is on the second floor layer. Let's go ahead and click on the first floor scene tab again, and now that should be updated. Let's take a look and notice the opening that we have here. What I want you to do is take the rectangle tool and draw the rectangle for that opening. Double click on the selection, go to Edit, Cut, go on to the first floor. Let's double click on our group here. I'm gonna unhide. And let's go to Edit, Paste in Place. What we've done with Paste in Place is we've pasted where that opening is for our group here. Let's push this down now until we intersect the floor here. And then take the select tool and delete the two faces there. So that now when we click on the overview and we unhide the rest of model, we can walk through and we can now see the opening between the first floor and the second floor. Now it is a little off there, so take push pull this so that it's right at this edge. You can now take the eraser and erase this edge. That way you have that one flush surface. Now with the opening created between the first floor and the second floor, we can move on to the next chapter where we're going to create the staircase